All right, guys. Hey, I'm Justin,
I'm Jazz.
and today we're going to be doing a diesel Gopher Garage modern day muscle car comparison, talking about the big three, the Chevy, Dodge, and Ford, and talking about what they have to offer for the high end muscle cars. So, I'm going to start off here, do a little high level overview. There's a lot of stats listed here. These came from the manufacturer's websites. So for Chevy, the top of the line track pack muscle car is the Camaro ZL1 1LE. It's the only car that's going to be talked about today that's offered with a manual transmission, and it's powered by a 6.2 liter supercharged V8. Our next car on the list, the Shelby GT500 Track Pack Carbon Fiber Edition Mustang. This car is a pretty badass rig. Spec'd out very similarly as the Camaro. It's got a 5.2 liter supercharged crossplane V8, and it's powered. It goes through a 7-speed dual clutch automatic transmission. For Dodge, this has always been the heavy hitter of the three, horsepower wise, with the Hellcat and everything else they produced after that. So now the namesake of the highest performance Challenger you can get is the SRT Super Sport. First numbers we're going to go over today are horsepower. So we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. So the Camaro is powered by a LT4 supercharged 6.2 liter. It's the motor they've been using for several years now. It's making 650 horsepower and 650 foot-pounds of torque. The GT500 has what they call the Predator. It's a 5.2 liter cross-plane V8, similar to the 5.2 Voodoo that was the flat plane in the GT350 with some tweaks and changes. Obviously, cross-plane motor, so a lot different design, but similar block design. 760 horsepower and 625 foot-pounds of torque. And once again, the heavy hitter of the group, SRT Superstock Challenger, got a 6.2 liter high output Hemi, making 807 and 707. Wait, I'll let Jazz hit this one.
So you got the ZL1 coming in at about 388.3, and then you got the GT500, which is just a little bit heavier at 39.47. And then you got the Charger, or Challenger, sorry, which is at 4,441. So almost like 500 pounds heavier than the other two. Pretty crazy.
So the Camaro with the automatic weighs in pretty similar to the GT500, but that's with the carbon fiber package on the 500, and we're going to go over the price difference of that later. So pretty comparable cars, auto to auto, weight wise, but the Challenger definitely its own league. All right, 0 to 60 times. So the Camaro takes up the back of the list here, 3.5 seconds 0 to 60. 3.8 seconds with the manual tranny. The GT500 with the carbon fiber package comes in at 3.3 seconds. And I feel like they just did this just so they could say they're faster. At 3.25 seconds, the super stock Challenger SRT. So going around the Nürburgring, the Camaro kills them both. 7 minutes and 16 seconds a lap. The GT500 comes in at 7:39, and the SRT Superstock, they don't even post the time. Dodge does not want to brag about the time that thing could put down. However, it's rumored that the Hellcat, which of the previous generations there, ran about 750. Still quite a bit slower. I'm sure the Superstock could run a little bit faster than the Hellcat just because it's got more horsepower, but definitely not something Dodge is using in their advertising campaigns. All right, Jazz, you want to talk about the quarter mile times of these bad boys?
Yeah, so they're all pretty good quarter mile times. The L1, you're looking at about 11.7 seconds. And then the GT500, a little bit faster at 11.3. So you're about half a second faster there. And then I think, as expected, Challenger's running 10.5. This is probably where Dodge's biggest strong suit is. I mean, this is really where I think their marketing is going after, is getting a fast quarter mile drag car.
I remember this makes me think of the commercials on TV with the demon, and it's just doing a
Yeah.
huge burnout down the track.
Yeah, dude.
Definitely the
When
advertising.
I mean, that's like when they first brought him out, like the whole marketing campaign was just drag races. all they were doing is like bone stock from the factory car that gets you into the, pretty impressive.
All right, so now we're going to move on to pricing, which is probably one of the most important driving factors when you're going to be buying a car. So we'll start off with the ZL1 1LE. So I've spec'd out all of these cars blacked out because that's the coolest look you can possibly get. This is the ZL1 with the 1LE. All of these cars are going to be spec'd with pretty equivalent technology and performance packages. I didn't really add any sort of interior accessories. There's no weather guard floor mats or anything like that. I didn't click every box you could click. I focused on performance and pretty much just performance. Even the technology packages are pretty much performance based. It's the adaptive cruise control and stuff like that. So these are all specced out very similarly. So this car comes in at right under 77,000 bucks. It's actually going to be the cheapest car we're going to see today. The Mustang. So this car costs a small fortune and your firstborn child. $102,000 is the MSRP on this thing. You can see on the right there the carbon fiber track pack, which is kind of the big differentiator on this car versus just a normal GT500. That's 18 and a half grand. That is a major investment. It's cool, but yeah, you're talking some major money to get those little carbon fiber wheels, carbon fiber spoiler, and carbon fiber front end. Last but not least, you've got the big body car weighing in at over 2 tons. The Challenger comes at right under 95,000 bucks. Horsepower per or dollar per horsepower. The Challenger actually comes in first at $117 per horsepower. The Camaro is right behind it at 118, and the Mustang comes in at $133 per horsepower.
Gosh.
So, if you're just basing it off of horsepower and dollars, the Challenger wins. Camaro's really close second, and the Mustang is about a bus length behind. All right, Jazz, I'm going to give you the first floor here for exterior first impression. So why don't we start with the Challenger here?
So I think on the Challenger, it sticks to like the old school hardcore muscle car look. I think Dodge has done really good with that. It keeps like all the late 60s, early 70s styling, which I think is like excuse me, the staple of like American muscle. So I think they did really good on that, but it's also huge. Like it is a large vehicle.
It is a whale. I think a boat is not big enough. It's a whale.
Like I think the look is awesome, but I think it's just like it's just way bigger than I think you would want a sports car to be.
It's fair. All right, let's move on to the Mustang.
All right, so I think with the Mustang, they're really trying to get into that European market. Like it has very similar designs to what a European sports car would be like, like the big wide grille in the front and the just like the suspension components, like, they switched to the independent rear back in like 2015. So I think they're really trying to like get into that kind of design. And I mean, you can also see that with like the Mustang being offered in other countries now. Like I think it was like the first muscle car or American sports car to be offered in all other parts of the world. I think that was like a huge thing they did in like 15 or 16. So I think it doesn't really have that like American muscle kind of feel to it.
I would compare this car to like a BMW M3.
Yeah, yeah, it's like in that category for sure.
Or I guess
Like
is the M4 the coupe now? I think
I
M3
think yeah, I
sedan.
think they switched over to the M4, but like size wise and like design wise, I'd say they're pretty similar. Like obviously they don't look the same, but like the styling cues are probably more in the realm of like being same versus like the Challenger or the Camaro.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I do notice what's kind of interesting as we'll switch over to the Camaro next. This car is off the ground quite a bit, and it kind of reminds me of like the old like 68 GT350, where that car, like obviously leaf spring car, totally different universe,
Right.
but it did sit a lot higher. And as we switch to the Camaro, you'll see, and maybe it's just how these cars are presented on these manufactured websites, but um, the Camaro, how the body kit and everything sits on this car, it looks like it's gonna scrape the pavement just sitting there. It has the most,
Yeah.
in my opinion, the most aggressive track stance of all of those cars offered. But I'll let you give your opinion on this first.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's like a good mix in between the Challenger and the Mustang where it's like it still has those old school muscle cues, like it still has that like a kind of like updated version of like the early 70s Camaros with like the modern touches, and it still has like, the big rear, like it looks like it has that muscle car stance to it, and it definitely looks like a lot lower to the ground. Like if you just look where like in between the front and rear wheels, like, it doesn't look like there's much of a gap versus on the Mustang, it definitely looked like there's a gap going on there.
Yeah, I noticed too, and again, just disclosure, I own this car in white. Um, and there's a rake to this car from the back to the front that really gives you that like 60s like shackled up look, and obviously it's a lot more subtle because it has to be for this to be a good performance handling car. But you can actually kind of see the gap increasing as you move towards the back of this car. This car has those little winglets on the front. This is a 200-mile-per-hour car. It's a blast, and it handles like it's on rails. But as we go back towards the Mustang, you really don't have that rake. This car sits
Uh,
pretty flat, and you can see like even on those side skirts, there's a much larger gap on this car. Um, and what me and Jazz were talking about earlier too was this car, this Mustang, it really has a fastback design. It reminds me of like an Audi. From that roof line, there is very limited area where that roof line is flat. It comes up that A pillar of the windshield, and it pretty much immediately, as soon as it gets to the top, it starts sloping back down. We switch over to this Camaro. There's a lot of flat spot. Pretty much the entire driver's door, that thing's flat. It looks like a 1960s coupe in that regard,
yeah.
with a flat roof, and then it slopes. It had tapers down the back, and then goes to that huge wing in the rear. Um, and that's something that I'm seeing between this car and the Mustang. The Arrow is considered a lot more, and then we move to the Challenger, and it's pretty much just got the little ducktail on the back. Um, it's completely different aerodynamic design. This car is relying a lot more on its weight to keep it planted. These other cars are relying on aerodynamics to really force that downforce to keep these cars planted at either 200 or damn near 200 on the track. All right, I'm gonna skip to the next part here, interior. So we're gonna go through all these, take a look at these, and kind of talk about them, and then we'll go back and compare and contrast. But so again, I'm familiar with this one because this looks just like my car inside. Um, the one thing you'll see right in the middle is the differentiator between this car and the other two is a shifter because it's the only one that's offered in a manual. Um, I do like this interior. Again, slightly biased because I drive it every day, but there's some things I do like. So the seats have enough bolster where you stay planted pretty well, but they're not like they don't look like these huge like Formula One race seats that are having bolsters wrap all the way around you like a cage. Um, the seats do not recline past 91 degrees, which I'd say is the dumbest design I've ever heard of. Um, there's the rumors are between safety and hitting the back seat behind you. Um, whatever. There's some things you can do to get around that. So yeah, I think it's got the same design we're gonna see with the Mustang. It's got the speedo and the tack on the outsides, and it's got some digital gauges in the middle, and then your normal oil pressure, manifold pressure, temperature, battery voltage, digital analog gauges across the top. Infotainment in the middle. You're going to see after this slide, the Mustang is built very similarly as far as gauge design, steering wheel, and infotainment. But do you have any first opinions on this one, Jazz?
No, I'd say for me, the only thing is like just the AC vents being so low. I've never had a car with them so low, so to me, it's like I don't know if that'd be like nice or if it would be less ideal, only because I've always had them up top. So definitely something unique for me.
When you're sitting in traffic, it could be a good thing or a bad thing that you got a hand warmer right there. So
There you go.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the Mustang. So you want to touch on this one, Jess?
Yeah, yeah. So very similar to the Camaro when we're talking about like the infotainment setup. You just got that standard screen. I think it's like 7, 8 inches, and then you got your AC controls and whatnot. On this one, the AC vents are at the top of the dash, which is what I'm familiar with. I've all the cars I've ever had, they've been relatively similar like that. And then you got your gauge cluster there, which is I believe all digital on there. They actually have some cool little track packs where like the RPM wraps around this mile per hour. So it's a little bit more digital, a lot less analog these days with it. And then you just have your standard steering wheel controls, like audio, cruise control, stuff like that. You will notice in here versus the Camaro, there's on the left image no shifter. Um, there's just that dial because it only comes in the auto.
So there's something that I'm noticing here that if I was spending $100,000 on a car, 100,000 plus, there's no way I'd be reaching down to the floor and ratcheting the seat forward. At least that's what I would think. But
Right.
you are seeing on this one that it is a fully manual passenger seat. I believe it's still heated and cooled, which is kind of funny, but for sure heated. But it doesn't have electric motors to move that thing forward or recline it.
I'm curious if they have like a statement, if it's like they're trying to argue it's for like weight reduction reasons or something like that.
Mhm.
I feel like somebody would totally be like, bro, it's way heavier if you have the motors in there.
See, if I spent like, 16, 17,000 bucks on the carbon fiber package, I would hope that that differential could cause it to where I could have an electric seat. But, I guess
I
that's
agree.
asking too
I
much.
agree.
But yeah, I mean, this to me does not look that much different than the Camaro. It to me, it's a little bit boring because there's not a lot of colors. I did like the red
Yeah,
stitching in the Camaro.
yeah, it's very like bland, like one tone, like monotone interior kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah,
Which
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, so if I'm spending again like a mortgage payment a month, like I don't know. To me, this is not that impressive. It's not like it doesn't look bad, but it's just like it's not that wow, I just spent six figures on a car interior.
Yeah, I'm curious if they had like the packages to change the interior colors. Like if you get like red seats or stuff like that, I feel like that would really make it better. Obviously, probably add to the price, but
Yeah, yeah, that could be. Yeah, then this are just ones I got off the internet. So it's possible that there's other options, but yeah, just like I said, the Camaro, what I do like about that is pretty much comes when you buy a ZL1 1LE, there's not a ton more you can add. It pretty much gives you all of the stuff you'd want with those packages. I did notice
yeah,
for the Dodge and the Mustang, there were quite a few other options that you would be able to add if you wanted to with interior and exterior styling. All right, last but not least, this makes me think I'm looking right inside the door of like someone's Resto Mod 70 Challenger. Yeah.
yeah. I completely agree. The seats look pretty comfy though compared to the other ones. Although I've never sat in a Challenger.
I'm seeing so they did do a like shifter. I believe that that's like a bang shifter like you'd use in a drag car so you can actually like slap it forward and back to shift it. Um I'm seeing paddle shifter paddles behind the wheel so it gives you both options, but Um, this, if you look at the left picture, I would not have been surprised if you told me that this was the ad for like a 2003 vehicle. Those AC vents are so cheesy. Those are like the old
Yeah,
plastic ones that you'd always break the little tab on. Um,
right.
the gauges are very basic looking. And nothing to say that I mean, the Camaro is not that much fancier, but it's not the best. And even the infotainment looks pretty small relative to the other ones that we've seen today.
Right. I think it's fun because like my brother has the 2012 Charger and it looks the exact same to this Challenger's interior. I mean, the steering wheel like airbag is different. They just changed the logo there and the buttons look different, but other than that, it looks like 85 to 90% like the exact same interior, which is kind of just like, I don't know, it's like a 10-year-old, 11-year-old
Aesthetic.
interior design. You're like, I want to refresh, especially when you spend in like almost 100K on a car. You want like I don't know. I think the interior is the most important part of a car when you're paying that much money for it.
Yeah, performance only gets you so far, and then you want something
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, and so
Yeah.
I will say that you can. It looks like you could probably fit like a family of four in that back seat, which is something that we can't say for those other two cars. So kind of cool. Like again, bulky car gives you more space. Like it's more spacious.
That
Um,
is true.
this
Probably the most practical for, like, a daily.
Yeah, the seats definitely look like the bolstering is good, so you probably could kinda, like, give it some gas in a corner and you wouldn't just be completely sliding all over the place, but they definitely have that early 2000s super thick, like, 200 pounds each seat kinda feel.
Yeah, definitely, and, like, even the, center console, it looks like it reminds me of, like, the '90s Supra, like, the Mark IV Supra, where it has, like, everything angled towards the driver,
Yeah,
which is cool, but I just feel like it's just, like, an outdated design.
yeah, a little bit, I could see that. Alright, final comparisons. So, let me know if you wanna go back to a slide to talk about it, but, my biggest thing, the Challenger is the most, I would say historically correct. That's probably a weird way to put it, but it definitely holds true to the tradition of a muscle car the best, in my opinion. It weighs
Yeah.
a ton, 2 tons. Uh, it weighs. It's got the most horsepower you can possibly shove in a car, which is so American muscle esque. Like this is like the old school,
Right.
ass, how many horsepower can we shove in this car theme? Like it fits that for sure. So if you were looking for like a muscle car, that's the car. Um,
Yeah, I would agree.
from an interior standpoint, I mean, none of these cars really blew me away. I wasn't like shocked that one of them was just so much better. Um, I want to lean on like what you said earlier. The Challenger definitely probably looks like it's the most comfortable. Um, if I had to go on like a long drive or like sit in the back seat, I'd probably want to be in the Challenger.
Yeah.
Um, but I liked the Camaro. Again, biased slightly, but I like the Camaro because it's got a lot of like aggressive styling. It's got the color added. It's got all that, but it's not like it's not cheesy about it. That's what I've seen with some cars that try to go like really bold. It looks really cheap.
Yeah, that is a huge issue I feel like a lot of new cars have,
Yeah, and that's
but
the Civic Type R. They have red seats in there, and that's a bold statement. And depending on what color the outside of your car is, it can look really tacky, in my opinion.
yeah.
So,
Especially, like, what material they're using for
yeah,
the interior. Like,
that's
if it's leather, like a nice quality leather, then it's probably good, but if you start using, like, the, like, cloth type materials, then it could not really work too well.
yeah. So there's that. Price. I mean, you're not. None of these cars are cheap. Um, I think that if you can afford one of them, like it's probably not that huge of a stretch to afford one of the others. Uh,
Right.
we kind of mentioned that the benefit to these over something more exotic like the BMWs, the Audis, the whatevers is the maintenance cost is significantly less because these are, I mean, all of these cars are using engines that are not that far off from what they're putting in the trim levels below. Um,
Right.
the
Like, you just
Mustang for me, it always makes me laugh because it doesn't look that much different than the four banger Mustang that you can get for like 24 grand at the dealership, right? Like
right.
it's the Camaro is not far behind, and the Challenger, I know they've gotten into having a much more affordable V6, like SXT or something like that. Um,
Yeah.
but the Mustang, it's kind of become the epitome of like the poor man's muscle car with like the turbo boost. So to see one that's literally $100,000 plus, it's pretty crazy.
Definitely is. I think, on the, just going back to what you said earlier, I think the biggest thing with all 3 of them is that the interior, I feel like it's really in the, like, late or early 2010s versus, like, new cars nowadays, you have, like, a pretty intense, infotainment system that kinda, like, takes up the dash, and I feel like that's where all these cars are lacking from, like, a car standpoint for, like, for, like, 2023, 2022 models, and then on the exterior, I feel like, just like what you said with the Mustang, it's just I don't know, like the front end of it. It's like you look at it and you're like, yeah, it's cool, but then like, some kid is gonna also buy one and just like buy a body kit and like try to flex that it's the same car with half the cylinders.
Yes. So, okay. So that leads us into our final question, and that is, which would you rather own and why?
So I would say like out of all of them, the Camaro seems like the best from like a financial standpoint and just like what you're getting out of the car. Like you're not paying the ridiculous like 100K that you are for the Mustang. And I think from a performance standpoint, you're getting the best of like a trackable car like on a circuit, but you're also getting that like American like muscle vibe to it. So it's
Mhm.
like a good balance between them. Whereas like the Mustang, like I'm a huge Mustang fan, and I still like it's a little out there for me. Like I don't know if I'd be willing to do that. I mean, good like you can take the carbon fiber wheels and whatnot off, but then at the same time, it's like, what are you getting? Like, is the Camaro still gonna like? There's a lot of opportunity with the Camaro for the extra money that you're saving
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah. So what's your final answer? Locking it in.
Locking it in, I'd probably get the ZL1.
And so since you chose that option, the follow-up, are you getting it with the manual or the automatic?
Oh, I'm definitely going the manual because like I'm getting this for fun. Like I'm not getting it to like, try to become a pro racer or nothing. Like I want driver's experience. I want to have fun at the track. Like I just want to have a good time.
Okay. So I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm kind of biased because I do have a 2018 ZL1 with the manual. So I'm going to recluse myself from voting for the Camaro. So my choices are between the Mustang and the Challenger. I think I'm gonna vote for the Challenger because I'm an old school guy. My Camaro was my first car that had AC. So I've always been driving old schools, and I love that it really sticks true to that completely boxy, ridiculous, put as much horsepower as possible to this, reasonable sized car. Um, I think that the price point was a big seller for me versus the Mustang. The Mustang, and not a huge Ford guy, but I've got a 68. I like a nice car when it's there, but there was nothing that really justified to me the price difference of, $30,000, $20,000 between the Camaro and between the Challenger. I think we were looking at what, 10 or 20.
Yeah, about
So
10, 20.
yeah, so I just there's nothing that stood out to me as like, oh my God, that's why. So like same point you made, if I was racing every weekend, there's no way in hell I'd buy the Challenger. I'd buy one of the other two. Um, but I drive to work 90% of the time that I'm putting mileage on that car. So I'd go with the Challenger. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, like, we talked about everyone's got that demon commercial in their head where they're sitting there at the drag strip doing a burnout. I mean, that's awesome. That's why you buy a car like that. I mean,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
if you really were a track guy, you wouldn't even be looking. You'd be looking at the Ford GT or the C8 Z06. I mean, these are cars that these companies have been able to turn a. I mean, they're all boats relative, right? They've been able to turn these
Oh
big,
yeah.
boxy four-seater cars into reasonable track cars. But again, they're not purpose built for that, and so that's why I think I'd go with the Challenger. I think that's the best. What you get, the smiles per gallon on that thing versus the other
Oh yeah.
cars. Since I can't vote for the Camaro, that would be my first choice, but I'm gonna go with the Challenger.
Good man. Good man.
So that wraps up this one. Like I said, like and subscribe. Let us know if there's any other car comparisons that you'd like to see. And with that, be logging out.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Jazz, for joining us today.
So later, man.